All right, Entree Architect community, it's 2 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, which means it must be time for Context and Clarity Live. Thanks for joining us today. I keep saying this, it's not really the new time anymore, but it is our time since our shift from 4 p.m. on Thursdays. But we're back for the fall season of Context and Clarity Live. And this is a place where we talk about the things that are important to you, no matter what your context is. We know that if you're joining us here, you're probably a small firm architect somewhere in the world. That narrows it down just a little bit. But we strive to have these conversations and uncover the things that matter most to architects just like you. So thanks for joining us today. I am joined as usual by my co-host, Katie Kangas. Welcome back, Katie. Glad that you're here today, all the way from Minnesota. We have this is really exciting because we have a fully Midwestern day today.
We do. It's going to be a very polite conversation.
This is true. This is absolutely true. And you may get some Midwestern lingo, but our first two people in the audience today, I guess Scott was first. He's joining us from San Francisco, and Chris is joining us from Massachusetts. So, we've got jokers to the left, clowns to the right, however that went, and the three of us from the Midwest right here in the middle. So it's going to be a good day. Let's see. We've got welcome Scott Thrift from San Francisco. He's joining us today via which platform is that? That is, I about called it Tinder. It is not. It's Twitch. It was a different T. Scott may be on Tinder. I don't know, but he's on Twitch today. He's heading up the audience. He's in West Lafayette at heart. So here's some trivia about Scott Thrift. Scott and I have become very good friends. His sons, one graduated now, but one is in West Lafayette, Indiana at Purdue University. My daughter and I did a campus visit to West Lafayette last week to Purdue University. So Scott he's in the Midwest at heart, but he's joining us from San Francisco. Chris Novelli is joining us from Massachusetts, and Don Duncan, also from the Midwest in Indiana. Glad Don is joining us today. And so we have LinkedIn, we have Twitch, and we have Facebook represented here. And Chris being on Facebook reminds me that if you are like Chris, you're on Facebook, maybe you're commenting away from some closed channel, closed group there, private group on Facebook. There are rules, there are regulations that say that Facebook will not allow your name, your likeness, your comment, etc., outside of Facebook unless you give it permission. And we're using Restream here. That's our broadcast platform. So if you open up another tab and type chat.restream.io/FB, just like it says in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, a couple of clicks later, you will give Facebook permission to let your comments out. Daryl gave me the correct order. Thank you for that. Facebook will let your comments out and you'll start showing up just like Chris, just like Mark R. LePage. Welcome, Mark, from North Carolina. And that will solve all the problems that you have in the world. Just a couple of clicks at chat.restream.io/FB. So we're glad all of you are here. Daryl says Joker to the left in Rochester, New York. Welcome, Daryl. I'm glad you're here. Scott says from Fredericktown, Ohio. He's giving his family history till the Oregon Trail in 1850. So Scott is at least an honorary Midwesterner. We'll give him that. Right now I think Midwest is carrying the show. So that's interesting to see. Glad you're all here from the middle of somewhere. All right. In terms of housekeeping, Katie, or anything else really, what do we still need to know? Anything?
I think you covered it. Yeah, I think we're getting used to the new season and reminding ourselves of everything we need to share. But it's good to see everybody on. And Jing Johnson just joined us too, also on LinkedIn. So we're getting a lot across platforms today. We're just missing like X.
Yeah, that's true. We have not had an X person here yet, so maybe today, well, or YouTube either. I forgot
Or
about that.
YouTube.
We need a
Mhm.
YouTuber and or an X person. Gene, welcome from Houston today. Glad you're all here. This is going to be. We were talking about this before we went live. We need to have today's guest in my pro practice class because we touch on some of the things that I'm sure we will discuss today in this conversation. But our guest today is an architect. She's a change maker. She's a founder. She operates under the philosophy that good design can change lives and believes in challenging the status quo by making good design available to anyone. She's the founder and the director of design for Astra Studios. Amanda Dunfield, welcome to Context and Clarity Live, all the way from Columbus, Ohio.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Hello. Absolutely.
Welcome,
Glad that you're
welcome.
here. I'm really glad that you're here, not just because you're we've got to do this shout out for all the Ohioans out there. You're in the heart of it all.
That's right. We are.
That's an Ohio thing, right? I said that we talked before, and I mentioned just now that you need to speak to my pro practice classes, because one of the things that comes up in a discussion, at least in my discussions, my classes about architecture, pro practice, is what's the real role in 2023? Here we are. I don't even know what the math is. I ran out of fingers. The story of AIA and the 13 guys in February in New York in 1857, right? So if we take AIA, founding of AIA, 1857 to 2023, what is the real and appropriate role? And I know you think more broadly than just architecture, but
Yep.
if we think about it in terms of architecture, what is the real appropriate role for an architect in 2023? And I have a lot of students that are interested in social justice. They're interested in housing and security. A lot of topics that when I was in school were never discussed or rarely. So I think that's one of the reasons that it's really interesting to have you here and really interesting to talk about that idea of making good design available to anyone. So how did this get started? How did this focus on making change, on change makers, and making design accessible, if I can say it that way? Where did this all begin for you?
Yeah. Where did it begin? I think it's the reason why I became an architect to begin with, right? I think so many designers broadly, but certainly within the discipline of architecture, we're called to find a way to make the world a better place, right?
Yeah.
And I think we get it like exposure to that in school too, right? That we have agency there, and we have a powerful tool at our hands. And then we get into practice, and I think a lot of us get disappointed because, yes, the learning the craft, right? That needs to happen, right? And it almost doesn't matter what you're working on. You need to learn the tools and understand the process in order to get, from idea all the way through construction on a project and what that takes. But eventually that's not, like, for me, that wasn't enough, right? We needed to find a way to be using those skills for a client that we didn't normally serve, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones who I wanted to figure out how to help. And so after I got out of grad school, I took a break of 4 years in between undergrad and grad school. So I got out and worked and got experience. And after grad school, I took the Public Interest Design Institute through Brian Bell. So they came to Cincinnati and hosted a 2-day workshop. And sitting there, like being with other professionals who are really interested in public interest design and who were doing it, right? And they brought in speakers. It was very powerful to see like how other people were starting to address this, how to use design in a meaningful way in their communities, right? But what I learned is most of them were nonprofits, and most of them were attached to a university. So I was like, okay, that's certainly a model, but like, how do we have a model that's different than that? How do we have a for-profit model that's doing good in the world? Like, how do we make this a sustainable business model that is, that could actually be the thing that we do all the time, right? So I think it started off as the reason why I got into design to begin with, but the crafting the how has taken since like 2011.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. I like the way that you said that. And you mentioned the model, the business model. And that's a hill I'm willing to die on. When the stereotype, and it's more than a stereotype, there's a lot of reality, a lot of reality to this, but when the stereotype is that architecture and architects and the things that architects do, the things that architects design is primarily for the 1% or something, so, the elite, basically, whether that's a college or university or a very rich residential client or somebody like that. I will forever contend that if you want to practice architecture for others, and I don't know if that's 99% or 80% or whatever the balance is, that there has to be a different business model, because the traditional model is literally designed to serve those people, whether it's a percentage of construction or whatever the model is. And so I love that you lead with that, because I think you're exactly right. And I want to know more about how you've thought about that and how you've deconstructed that and how you're putting it back together.
Sure. So, do you want me to talk about the actual model that we have then?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I went off on my own in 2016, and I've gone through a variety of iterations of this, right?
Sure.
Right out of the gate, it was like, just get jobs and do jobs, right? Mm-hmm. And then on the side, try to figure out, okay, how do we start tweaking this to do something else, right? And I guess to lay the groundwork of this story of Astra Studios and me is I went out on my own, had 2 major surgeries, and then 2 babies within the first 4 years of practice.
You were busy.
And then there was that little thing called the global pandemic, so there was a lot of starting and stopping and then starting again and stopping again. And so after the birth of my youngest daughter in October of 2020, as I was coming back to work, I was like, I have to make a decision here, right? Like, am I going to stay small and I'm just going to like take on one-off projects here and there and stay at home? Or am I going to really attack this problem, right? And the universe was calling me to do something bigger. And, there's a point, I think you hear this from people, like, you can't ignore the calling, right? Mm-hmm. It'll beat you over the head eventually.
Like Icarus to the sun. You're just drawn to it.
Yeah. I just couldn't put it down. And then after all the civil unrest and the murder of George Floyd, I was like, I can't be silent. I can't keep this to myself. We need to figure out another solution. And so I started figuring out how to build a team again. So now we're a team of 7. And we call ourselves a social impact design studio. So we don't just do architecture. It's architecture, interior design, brand design, and website design. And we do all of those things because the clients we serve need us to think about design holistically so that they are showing up in all the places where they are in a consistent way. We work with a lot of entrepreneurs, restaurateurs, that, small businesses and small organizations, and they don't have the bandwidth to handle like a handoff, right? So we've been adding all of these disciplines to what we do. Not, I think they all reinforce the business plan, right? But I don't think it was not my intention when I started doing this that I was going to like do all these things. The core though, right? The why is, how do we use design to make the world a better place? How do we bring design access to the world? And I think the answer is we have to find a way to work with the organizations that are already doing the good work, right? And so a lot of times those are nonprofits, but now there's also social enterprises, right? So a social enterprise, for anyone who doesn't know, it can be a for-profit or nonprofit entity, but they have social good as a part of their core mission. And for a for-profit social enterprise, you're giving a portion of your profits back to something, right? And so that was sort of like one step for us, is to just say, okay, we're a social enterprise. We're going to give a portion of our profits to provide design access to social impact organizations, right? But like, that's not, we don't make enough money to have that even come close to meeting the need that we see, right? So this is, again, I am a big thinker. I'm always tinkering with things, and it's like, okay, this isn't quite working good enough yet, right? So I've now created a fund through the Columbus Foundation, through the United Way, that will, in a much broader sense, provide design access then to social impact organizations. And I say social impact organizations because I want to be clear. It's not just the nonprofits, right? Yes, nonprofits, but there are for-profits that need this work too. So we have to have a tool that can help both of them. And so we're just really starting that journey. That's all structurally set up. I am about to have a big conversation on Monday. So fingers crossed, everyone, that we get a nice pot, some funding going on in there. Oh, I just saw a question. How can we help or copy the model? Yeah, I mean, I think so. The big vision in this, right, is we all know this. Like the work is needed everywhere, and it's sort of specific to that place. So in the the goal is to figure out how this business model is going to work here in Columbus, Ohio, and within this region. And then after we figure that out, really like grow these studios around the country. Because again, this is it's sort of like a grassroots movement. How do we actually help co-create the projects that we want to see in the world, and then get to work on those projects, right? And we don't want to provide that just for like us as individuals. We want to be able to provide other designers with the ability to do that too.
So you have certainly worked in other firms in your career, right? As you're coming up, what is, what's the biggest difference between Astra Studios and a traditional firm that you worked for in the past?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first let's start. I've worked at 13 different offices. So I went to the University of Cincinnati. We co-op, and so you get used to jumping.
Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
So lots of different experiences. I think, we are similar probably to a smaller firm, right? We're all wearing multiple hats all the time and sort of, also running around with our hair on fire, maybe more than we should be. And the architecture and interior design we do is like very similar. I think how we're different is really what we've been trying to create is an integrated model where everything we do is starting with the story, which is a branding like philosophy, right? So we start with story and then carry that through into the other design disciplines. And that can just sometimes be the architecture and interior design, right? But it's bringing then the other like branding in the environmental branding into that space, or it can just be just the story and then carrying that into a website or what other like marketing collateral a client might need to be able to make sure that they're showing up in those spaces in the way that they are in their physical spaces, right? Does that make sense?
It's getting more reasons to talk to someone. It's giving the client more reasons that they should reach out and just talk with you because they may not be looking at a building yet, or they may not have a website yet, depending on where they are in that entrepreneurial process. But that idea of that buzz, and it's almost a group that's got a lot of energy inherently. It sounds like the clients you're working with are highly motivated either by the purpose that they're trying to serve, a social good, or because they're just trying to get that thing started. And so that there's that early buzz that you can work with. And it sounds like the way you talk about it, you can meet that energy exactly and just help them channel it. Yeah. It sounds fun.
It is. I mean, I think that's just it. Why, like, how do I want to say this? Architecture can be kind of stuffy, right? Like it can be, and it shouldn't be. I mean, it affects everything, right? It's everything you do, you're moving through something that an architect touched at some point in time. I mean, I guess unless you're in the woods, right? We should be having fun. And I think we have a burnout culture or a toxic culture that comes out of school that we carry through into practice. And I think that like the younger generations are ready to put that down. If they're going to work so hard and be like, what's the right word? Just like so stressed out and so invested, right? It's that emotional attachment to your projects, right? If you're going to provide that kind of output, it should be to something that you actually care about and not just lining some wealthy person's pocket, to just continue the the capitalistic system that we're operating within. And I think that's it. Like what we're trying to do is maybe hack capitalism a little bit, right?
Hack on it. There.
Sorry.
So I heard from other architects who were more seniors several years ago that they've been doing pro bono work their whole careers, that's always been a part of their practice, that they use it to benefit disadvantaged communities that are nearby them to do that work. And pro bono is either reduced cost or free. I also was watching a TED Talk this morning about this sort of open source idea of people designing together, but everyone just donates their time and donates everything. The way you talk about this and present this, it sounds more sustainable because you want to make it status quo to be able to serve these projects within a for-profit structure. And so what makes this the time that you think this will work and take hold? Because I feel like architects have wanted to do this for a long time. it's just hasn't manifested. And the way that you're puzzling this through and working it out, it seems to be taking more traction with the format that you're presenting.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see, right? Is the like we'll see. Well, we can touch base again in a year or two and like see how this has developed. But yeah, when I was thinking about this after grad school, the models that I saw out there were people who had for-profit architecture firms and then a nonprofit architecture firm. And then the for-profit was subsidizing the nonprofit, right? And that's a model, right? The issue is that you have to spend so much time and energy doing the things that make the for-profit firm work that you don't have much time to give to the nonprofit firm. And then what happens when there's a recession or work dries up or whatever? The first thing to go is going to be the nonprofit in general, right? And so that's what I kept coming back to, is like, this is not sustainable. This is not an actual answer to how we can address the needs that we see all around us, right? And again, in a meaningful and an impactful way, and have it be the focus of what we do, instead of, we get to touch it once a month, or we get one project a year, or whatever it is.
Daryl's got a good question, and it's about funding. Is there another funding mechanism to support your firm, the time it takes to offer architectural services? And many, and I know from my students over the years, they've all been fascinated, not all, but many have been fascinated by Mass Design Group. Mm-hmm. Oh, they're the nonprofit architecture firm. And anybody that wants to go to my YouTube channel, you can see a couple of recordings from Matthew Smith, who has recently left Mass Design Group, I believe, but talking about mass design and architecture, et cetera. And if you don't know this, they're supported by a huge endowment, right? There's a funding mechanism. They are, yes, they're non-for-profit, but you look at the names of the people that fund their endowment, and it's the who's who, right, of philanthropists, which is fantastic. Allows them to do what they do, but that's a different model even than what you're talking about. So I guess to Daryl's question is there more funding somewhere in this machine that allows you to balance these things, that allows you to provide these services in these ways? And then I've got a thought on how what you're doing is like the Apple Store, but we'll get back to that.
Oh, I'm so curious. So, I mean, again, our model is really still at the core, it's still a traditional for-profit business model, right? We take on projects and they pay us for them. The thing that we've added is that we now have a fund that philanthropic dollars can go into to help provide design access to people and organizations who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford design services. I am always trying to find other potential revenue streams to help support this. I mean, because really the philosophy here, and we do a little bit of anything and everything. And I know someone asked to look at the website, and I'm like, we're constantly like, we have projects, we need to get up there still. Like, it's ever evolving, as you all know. But we sort of do anything is pushing resources to mission, right? But I think that's a version of us. The future version of us is being able to be a little bit more picky about what we're taking on and making sure that the projects are more aligned with what our mission actually is, right?
That's where I think this gets really interesting to me. So I mentioned the Apple Store, right? And if you're Apple, you can go out and you can hire Bowen Schwinsky Jackson, or however BCJ, however you pronounce the names of their firm, and you can create this iconic brand that is, obviously the brand of Apple. I've got to be careful. I'm going to put the build your brand hat on. The brand artifacts of Apple, right? The brand artifact that is the Apple Store, designed by BCJ, all of them, I believe, by the firm out of California. The brand artifacts that are the white boxes, that are everything else about Apple, some of that designed in-house, some of that designed by other designers. There's no one in your neighborhood that has whether you're in Columbus, Ohio, Indianapolis, Indiana, Minneapolis, Minnesota, or just about anywhere, there's nobody in your neighborhood that can afford to create those brand artifacts. But you still have organizations that are worthy of that sort of brand recognition, or that I forget how you said it before, but carrying that design all the way through the architecture. Maybe it's retail, maybe it's the displays in the store, maybe it's the website, maybe it's the swag, maybe it's whatever, right? And that's what I think is really interesting about what you're doing. Is I always say that as an architect, your job is to make your client's life better, period. Whatever that means to them, it's different for every client. But if it's a business, and Astra Studios can essentially bring the an Apple level design in that it's thought through, it's designed all the way through, because we know, I mean, if we were really honest about it, and all of us looked around at all of our brand artifacts, our websites, our business cards, our logos, and all the other stuff, we go, yeah, this ain't Apple, right? We're designers, we're architects, we're professionals, but we don't have it going on like Apple's got it going on. So if Astra Studios can do that for the local coffee shop, for the not-for-profit, for whoever it is, that to me gets really interesting. I love the multiple streams of income. I love the fact that you can do this, and you haven't used the term triple bottom line, but it's got to be in here somewhere in the social enterprise, right?
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting way of serving clients at a different level, right? And one of the names that keeps coming to me is IDEO, right? And they're even broader, right, with all the services that they provide. But I think it's an interesting way to really impact your clients in ways that many of them, I'm guessing, never even dreamed of.
Yeah, I think like the clients that we tend to serve, right? They don't even know that they need design. They don't even understand what design is, right? They don't know how to ask.
Most people outside of Apple don't.
They don't know how to ask for it. And so it's kind of, I mean, a big part of actually what we need to do as far as like marketing, right, is actually education. It's educating people about the value of design, which as a profession, by the way, we need badly. And then the why would you pay for this? What should the ROI of design be for you, right? And we want to make sure that we're empowering our clients to really maximize that ROI and hopefully really expand and amplify whatever the impact is that they're looking to have.
This is just so exciting. I see just this network growing for you because the people you work with will want to know each other. And I just see you as growing as that network and that connection and that resource for all of them as this continues to evolve and grow. There just seem to be so many things possible. as you continue to talk to more people and grow that network. And incredible to hear that you've gotten the United Way locally to start to fund, and that's a national organization, I believe. And so once you start to introduce those ideas at one scale, you start to see the possibilities for it growing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point for me, I guess, as the CEO, right, is to figure out how to make this work at this scale, but really systematize everything so that we can not just scale like in size here, but actually transplant this model to other places and have it be successful there, right? And not have to reinvent the wheel every time.
I think, one thing that intrigues me about this is, and I was talking with somebody about this earlier today, is that one of the ways, a guilty pleasure, one of the ways that I like to stir the pot is to ask architects, in your state, what percentage of projects require an architect's involvement, require an architect to stamp that set of drawings, or whatever's appropriate for the project. And if you're in New York or Pennsylvania or New Jersey or California, you're all of them, in 48, 47, 46 of the states in the union, that's not the case. The majority of projects don't require an architect. You could hire an engineer to stamp it, or it's residential and it's not required anyway, et cetera. And I mean, that's the reality. The majority of the projects in the United States. So those of you that are in our audience that are outside the United States, I apologize for a very U.S. centric comment, but I think this model is intriguing because you could expand the reach of the profession by providing that value that doesn't normally come from a traditional architecture firm. Provide more value, expand the reach of the profession into projects that may not have had the involvement of an architect anyway, but you bring the sensibility, the expertise, all the things that you bring to the table. And I know you've got more in your staff, including a Story Brand certified brand guide, which I enjoy.
Yep.
That's another thing that intrigues me about this model, is that you could be going the opposite direction of the way that I see a lot of things happening, right? I think the profession is in danger of really drawing back, right? If we don't think differently about the services that we provide, the way that we provide them, you're going the complete opposite direction with that.
Yeah, I feel like there was a reckoning still that needs to happen for a lot of architecture firms, that we can't just pretend that what happened over the past couple years didn't happen and revert back to what we were then, right? It's different. I think our employees want something different. I think the public is asking for something different. And I think that the answer is going to be different for all of us, but certainly, for us, it's, again, just like really honing in on what is the purpose for us being here, right? And how do we make sure that we are using really like our skills, our passions to make the world actually better, and not waiting. And again, this is for me, like, I'm not going to wait for someone else to come up with an answer. We just got to start like tinkering with it and see what works.
Yeah, I love that. Don's got a good question too. And this probably goes to the different iterations, right? And I love the fact I am almost 3 weeks now into our incubator that I'm running for Shadow Partners. And what's funny about the startup world is that there's constant iteration, right? And there's constant learning, changing, throwing it out and starting over, et cetera. So Don wants to know, when you started out, did you find yourself changing your fee structure when working with not-for-profits versus for-profit clients? That happens a lot. Been there, done that. So how about you? What's your experience?
Yeah. I mean, I think as a young firm, when we first, I mean, we're still not like we have all the answers now. It was just like any work, get any work, right? So I was not making fees that were not, my fees were not what they should be, right? I was undervaluing myself. And so it almost didn't matter if it was a for-profit or nonprofit in that regard.
Oh no.
I think now, this is again what we're using our internal funding mechanism for. So if there's a client that we really want to work with who we give a proposal to who cannot afford our services, we can then choose to use some of our internal funding to reduce the cost to them. But I think this is an important part that I try to preach here. We cannot give a discount without them understanding what the value is. Otherwise, they're not going to appreciate the discount.
That's
so
a great point.
Putting the full market rate price out there is really important. And then we can back down off of that in order, or remove scope or whatever it is to get it within what they can't afford.
Yeah. So let's talk about the internal funding mechanism for a minute. I mean, who all has contributed to that fund, and how is that governed? How does that work? So, hey, they don't have it. We could take it from this. Should we, how does that work?
So sorry, which one? Our internal fund or the fund with the United Way?
Yeah, I guess I'm mixing those. I'm mixing those up. Let's start with the internal and then go to the United Way.
Yeah. So the internal, the way that has happened to this point is, and we're trying to get a better system in place, right? It's been a little just Amanda gut check. like, oh, I really want to do this project with this client. Like, we're just going to make it happen, right? And what we need to do when we do something like that is quantify what kind of resources we're putting into that to be able to track those metrics over time. So I think, like, for instance, what's the number right now? I think like since 21, we've given away like over $20,000 worth of services, right? But so there's not, because it's our internal decision, there doesn't need to be a whole lot of structure. There doesn't have to be too much structure, and there doesn't need to be too much of an approval process. It's just like, can we afford this right now? Do we like, how bad is it going to hurt us? And if so, like, how bad, right? And then sort of go from there. But where I want to get to is really tracking, having a goal for how much we want to be giving away each year, and be tracking the metrics around that goal. So this is, again, like how we're in the stage of going from startup mode and flying by the seats of your pants, right? Into growing up into a real company. So we have some business consultants helping us to be able to get all of those good big business practices and models like built in to the structure here. But the United Way fund is, again, brand new. It's the structure is there, though there's just no funding yet. So this is what I've been saying lately. I'm like, hi, yes, I'm an architect, and I'm starting to fundraise. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I also, this is why I'm an entrepreneur and a founder, and probably a serial entrepreneur is the right terminology for me. I'm not afraid to go and try. I know that I'm not going to probably knock it out of the park from the get-go, but we'll learn from it and continue to do better over time. So the way that is structured is that there's a fund set up with them, and there's going to be a review committee that decides how that funding is then allocated. So there will be a whole application process, and we need to test it out and see what works and what doesn't, and then tweak it. I think this is like the right now iteration of this. There's a future version that maybe it's a standalone foundation or something. I don't know, but this very quickly gets out of what I know anything about, right?
It's a terribly exciting time to talk with you about it, though, because you are figuring out, you are in the midst of it. And I remember talking with you and Matt earlier about this. Matt also works for you at Astra. And so it seemed like this was going to be 3 or 4 years out, but the timeline has just crunched, and it just seems like you're getting so much traction on it that you weren't expecting. And so it's exciting to see this boosting forward, just like your little logo of a rocket. It's going, and you're just trying to hang on and keep it going. And it's very fun. And there seem to be so many possibilities. I know when I've worked, like when passion projects come up and think, okay, maybe this is like, I work with them. They're kind of an ambassador in some sense. And it's kind of like part of my marketing budget is kind of offsetting the cost of some of the fees I might be discounting, but always invoicing them for the full amount, but to show them that value. But then this discount, like I might be a little too good at writing that off for passion projects. But it sounds like the way that you're formalizing this and making it fair to those who are applying and making that process more systematized will help you to do that guilt-free, to say this is part of that process. And yes, you are an ambassador. You are this person who's going to push these elements forward, and we're going to reap the benefits of that with new relationships that are going to form, with the success we're going to see in sharing your story through all these different markets. And we're going to have this stronger relationship that's going to build. And so finding those key partners seems to be that the challenge point. Like, who's going to be a good alignment for that, and what criteria can you know from the start to tell if it's going to take off the way Astra wants it to?
Yeah, the creating the program was a really interesting deep dive into how do you weigh these different projects against each other, right? And give one more merit than the other, maybe eventually. I don't know that we have the full right answer. We are actually working with a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant to make sure that we're not missing something that is not doing the thing that we want it to actually be doing, right? What was my point? There's just so much we don't know in this, how it's going to work, right? But we're trying to do the best we can at the onset. We really were building our rubric of how these projects will be assessed off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So the lower you are, the lower your project is in meeting the basic human needs, the higher it will be ranked then, right?
That's fascinating to bring that into it.
Yeah. Gone full on psychology now.
Thought experiment. Again, it's like, what on the clients that we're hoping to serve and the clients that we do serve now, right? I think one of the new disciplines that we will end up bringing into the firm is someone who is a social worker or, you know, a psychologist, understands humans, like the whole human, in a way differently than we do as designers, right?
That's fascinating. It really is. The I'm stuck on Maslow for a second. But I also, one thing that really stands out to me, and I was thinking about this because there's something that's pretty complicated about this, but there's also something that's really pretty basic, pretty simple about this. And I think and so I was wondering, why don't more firms do this, or why don't more firms think like this? And that's pretty easy, because this is the way we've always done it. That is the most dangerous statement in our society today. But to me, what it comes down to, and you're talking about systematizing and all this, it comes down to intentionality, right? How are we being intentional about all of these things that we do? And again, having been there, done that a number of times, a lot of these things that you're talking about are done, right? Hey, we're going to give a discount, or we're going to, whatever the story is. But I think a big difference is that there's not a lot of intentionality. We're going to go out and we're going to intentionally serve XYZ, whether it's a community or, I don't know, musicians or whatever it is. And here's how we're going to do it. Right. I think that's what's an important takeaway for what you're talking about, is that there are a lot of people that are trying to do this within the structure of a traditional firm model. And again, I'll die on this hill. You can't do it. You have to get outside of that model.
Yeah.
And that to me is the important takeaway. You're not that far outside, right?
No.
This isn't like bizarro world, but you're outside of that model, and you're intentionally outside of that model, and you're really thinking about how you serve a lot of different layers, a lot of different types of clients in different ways within your same structure. And I keep using the word fascinating. It is fascinating to me. So I love this. I love the fact that you're exploring it, and I also love the fact that you don't have it figured out.
Yeah.
But that's.
Who does?
but I think that's important. I actually think that's really important, because a year from now, if we have a part 2 of this conversation, you're going to be at a different place on the road, and you're going to have some different answers.
Yep.
And you're going to have realized some things and discovered some things and done some different things. And if nobody's willing, you said something like this earlier, if no one's willing to do it, we're not going to get there. Right. And, all of our biggest fears about drafts people and IT people and, whatever, they're going to come to fruition because we weren't willing to give it a shot. We weren't willing to try it. And I applaud you for trying it. And I like what I see here. I like what I hear here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That is validating. I think that this confuses a lot of people. What in business, just business people, and in the architecture world, they're like, and I get the question a lot. Like, well, so how are you going to make money? Like,
how are they making money?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is a little bit tongue in cheek, but there are a lot of firms out there that are operating as a not-for-profit without filing as a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
All right. One book or 2 books that have popped up into my mind a lot during this conversation, both by Mike Michalowicz, Profit First and Fix This Next. I don't know if you've read either one. I think I saw something, Katie, about us having Mike back in January. But those books are about intentionality, right? I bring up profit first a lot, and people say, "Oh, it's we're not putting profit ahead of everything else." That's not the point at all. The point is being intentionally profitable. It's about setting up a structure that allows us to be profitable. And I get students all the, "Oh, we love not for profit." No, you have a responsibility to build a sustainable business. And that responsibility is for you, your family, the people that depend on you, the employees that depend on you, their families, your community that you're contributing to, et cetera. You have a responsibility to build this sustainable entity. And if you decide that you're going to give away all of your profits, I don't care. Good for you, I guess, whatever. But you have to be intentional about that. And Fix This Next is the extension. It's the next thing after Profit First. It's looking at the Profit First would fit into Fix This Next. It's looking at it more holistically than simply the finances, the profit finances of it. You might because legacy is one of the tenets, and I forget exactly how Mike describes it, but it's one of the tenets of Fix This Next. You might enjoy that book. It might really resonate with you based on what you're doing here. But
that's great.
My rumination on on business models, but I love what you're doing here. You get a lot of applause there from Christian. That's a lot of clapping hands.
Thank you, Christian.
Yeah. Katie, any last thoughts or questions? This has got me.
So many thoughts. It's so exciting. Yeah. I think one of the grandest things to hear about is that it's not like a traditional architecture firm of a pyramid where you're not just at the top. There's an architecture firm, I'll say this quickly, here in Minnesota called Sala, and they seem to have a different structure where they have, in their small firm of 10 or 12, 8 of them are principals. And so it's more of a circle. And inside that circle, they have their support staff and their interns and their other people who are helping those 8 all lead their own projects. And they sort of co-collaborate on different projects here and there. But those 8 people have gone through Sala for decades, and they go on to do great things. Sarah Suzanka and a whole bunch of other big names, Dale Mulfinger and a whole bunch. Yours reminds me of that business model because of how you've created this circle of resources with these different disciplines. And it's such a unique collection of disciplines, especially hearing how you're starting to round it off into a full circle of service firm for the clients that you specifically are trying to reach out to and serve. And so it's cool how that's starting to be informed by what you hear your clients asking for, and starting to mold yourself to be like, yeah, we could do that. Yes, that would build us up and that would serve you better. And so it's just so exciting where you are in this process. And it's going to be fun to check back in and hear how it continues.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate having this conversation with all of you, and look forward to following up sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Christian says we must, he shouted that, it's all caps, we must have a part 2. So, all right. So look for part 2, and, we'll figure out what an appropriate amount of time as you iterate, but we'll
after next Monday's meeting.
Yeah, right. Send me all the good vibes, please.
There you go. Amanda, I really appreciate you for joining us in this conversation and sharing your story with us. It's definitely food for thought. And I hope it's one of the things I love about Context and Clarity. Yes, I love stirring the pot. And I love bringing in different ideas, and whether from inside the profession or outside, to think about different ways that we can serve and we can build businesses and we can do the things that we love to do. So I really appreciate you bringing us this perspective. It gives us a lot to think about.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's great having you here.
Thank
And
you.
with that, everybody out there, we thank you for being here as well. Again, we've just launched into this, our second week into the fall season here. We've got, I think, 8 more weeks of context and clarity before we take a break for the depths of winter, I guess, basically the holidays, and then we'll kick off again in January. But several more weeks of context and clarity live to come. We look forward to it. Katie, as always, thanks for being my co-host here today. Appreciate you and everybody for this opportunity. And we'll see you again next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, everybody.